Okay, this is going to be quite a controversial hot take, and you guys are free to disagree with me on this if you don't agree with my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people will probably have some very strong views on this. However, I'm about to argue something that a viewpoint which I feel is underrepresented, and I want you guys to hear me out. And my view is Keir Starmer is actually one of the best possible prime ministers we could possibly have, especially in the past few decades. He is probably weren't expecting to hear that, but yeah, no. I maintain and I continue to believe that Keir Starmer is a silver lining in the clouds. He is a blessing in disguise. Why do I say that? Well, it's because Keir Starmer, I mean, people talk about him being dull and unlikable and having the mentality of a robot, basically. But it's not so much about the man himself. It's about what he represents and what he's a part of. So what is Keir Starmer? What does he represent? Well, he represents he represents the globo homo multicultural liberal world order as it first came into being in the late 90s under the new Labour government and Tony Blair, and it has basically stayed firmly in place and occupied the minds of everyone in Westminster ever since then. From Tony Blair, you got to understand, was a hugely influential and cunning politician, and he was so influential upon the next generation of politicians that basically everyone admired him and everyone became a Blairite. David Cameron's a good example of this. David Cameron, he actually unironically referred to Tony Blair as his idol. So you know that it was when Tony Blair got into power in the late 90s, there's a newspaper written about this by former speechwriter Andrew Neither, who wrote about how he and Jack Straw, his then Home Secretary, they concocted a sinister plan to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date by transforming Britain into a multicultural Britain. So they would, what they planned to do, it was very simple. They would open up the floodgates to basically anyone and everyone. Before Tony Blair got into office, the amount of annual net migration figures we would be getting, it was 5 figures. You know, people still had problems with the amount of immigrants we were getting, but they were nothing like what we've been having in the past decade. Nothing, not even a fraction. And it was largely confined to the big cities, you know, with and it didn't really affect the lily-white sort of suburban areas or the old English towns or villages or the Cotswolds. But that all began to change under the new Labour government, and it wasn't just immigration that he changed. He privatized. Well, he finished a process that was already underway when Margaret Thatcher took power. He privatized and sold off national utilities like the railways, although actually, no, I think that was John Major who did that. But he basically sold a lot of our public services to the highest bidder. And there's simply no debate to be had. Not one person has ever come out and told me that the trains were better now that they've been privatized compared to how they were back when they were nationalized. Because these foreign companies who own a stake in companies like Thames Water, yeah, our water supplies are owned by foreign countries. I think one of them is owned by a company in Hong Kong. Who thought it would be a good idea to sell our water company to Hong Kong? This kind of crazy institutional corruption could never be tolerated. But yeah, that's basically what he did. He let in all kinds of Johnny foreigners from all parts of the world. And why did he do this? Well, as I said earlier, he wanted to rub the right's nose in diversity. But there's a more sinister motive that not a lot of people realize. You see, in basic economics, there's the two intersecting axes of supply and demand. So if you have an abundance of supply of something, but there's not enough demand for it, then it becomes worthless. Now, what does this mean for immigration? Well, if you have a lot of low status, low skilled migrants from anywhere in the world who literally earn less than $1 a day and who are used to living in absolutely squalid conditions, they will inevitably outcompete local workers for wages. What this does is it depresses wages for ordinary workers. So Britain's population is massive. It's so much higher than it should be. There's even a conspiracy floating around that Britain's population, which I think is currently somewhere like 68 or 69 million, it's said to be much higher than that. So the evidence goes, and that there's a conspiracy at the top to make people continue to believe that our population is below 70 million. But a lot of the people who live in Britain, a lot of the people living here contributing to that high number, a lot of them didn't even live here until the past 10 or 20 years. It's gotten to the point where something like, I don't know exactly how much, something like a quarter of all British people now are foreign born. A quarter of all citizens living in this country are foreign born. You have people like Tony Blair to thank for that. He instituted the Global Britain Multicultural Project, and that has been in place ever since. Because when Labour lost the election in, I think it was 2010 or 2011, and David Cameron became Prime Minister, people mistakenly and naively believed that now that David Cameron and the Conservatives, the Tories, were in charge of the country, there'd be a U-turn, there'd be a policy reversal. But no, David Cameron only continued to accelerate the amount of immigrants coming into this country. And I didn't even mention the EU and the integration of our legal system with the EU, and the fact that there's all these government quangos in place that are unelected and unaccountable to any of us, that basically control and regulate government behavior so as to make us unable to pass any laws that we need. Like, for instance, the Supreme Court. Like, Britain never even had a Supreme Court until like 20 or 30 years ago. I remember there was this funny episode of The Lotus Eaters where one of the hosts said, "I got T-shirts in my chest of drawers that are older than the Supreme Court." It's not a British institution. It used to be that we would have the Lord Chancellor or the Lord Justice in the House of Lords. He was basically the de facto Supreme Court, and he would be in charge of rendering the final verdict on cases. But no, we had to make our legal system look like America because there was this huge, insatiable, the cultural zeitgeist at the time. This was around the time of the Macpherson inquiry and institutional racism. Basically, we wanted to make Britain like America. We wanted to be a global multicultural country. That equality, that's it. We had this rabid obsession with equality and ramming it down everyone's throats. It became the new official state dogma and policy. And no one was allowed to criticize it. You guys all saw what happened to Nick Griffin and the BNP, how they got absolutely pilloried in what should have been an impartial state broadcaster political panel show called BBC Question Time. Well, the state media was totally on board with this Global Homo project. Nobody was allowed to criticize. If you criticized any of their policies, you would be deemed far right, you'd be deemed an extremist and a racist. It's this there was a secret coup in the British establishment that occurred in the late 90s. And there's been a fascinating documentary about this by Ed Dutton, the Jolly Heretic, which you can watch on his website, called The Year Zero, where it explains how when Tony Blair got into power, he used his Machiavellian political savvy. He used the extensive network of individuals that he knew as a politician, because he was a very shrewd and capable politician. It's fascinating how he managed to do it, and he officially overnight he eviscerated all remaining vestiges of the British aristocracy, and he replaced it with the new Globo Homo multicultural Britain project. Just like that. And he didn't even have to kill anyone in order to do it. I think even Lenin and the Bolsheviks would have admired what he's managed to accomplish. Anyway, so getting back on topic to this matter of this video. So why do I feel that Keir Starmer actually deserves credit as a Prime Minister? Why is he the best thing to happen to Britain? Well, because of his actions and what he has done and what he stands for. So Keir Starmer represents the Labour Party. The Labour Party has always been, ever since Tony Blair took over the new Labour government, the Labour Party used to represent the interests of the working class. It used to represent the factory workers, the miners, like Arthur Scargill in the 1970s. It used to represent the trade unions, because back then there was a clearly defined working class culture that embraced the hardiness and the traditional lifestyles of Britain's working class. Britain had a very strong working class with deep roots in this country, and they worked traditional working class jobs like fishing, agriculture, working in the factories, working in the mines. But all that changed under Tony Blair's multicultural liberal project. All these jobs got sold offshore to foreign countries. All these jobs disappeared because that was part of Tony Blair's terrifying vision to take away jobs for working class people and give them to cheap labour abroad, essentially to make the rich people even richer than they already were. It was a thoroughly anti-working class position, because working class people are the ones who are always hit the hardest by these kinds of policies. Anyway, now, so taking into account all the monumental changes that took place throughout the institution of the new Global Britain multicultural project, the new, transforming Britain into a global economy. What has happened recently under Keir Starmer? Keir Starmer represents the current incarnation of the global project, but have you seen what he has been doing? Have you seen how universally unpopular the man is? I mean, what kinds of things has he done since getting into office? Well, first of all, he basically declared war on Britain's working class after the Southport attacks. He condemned all the rioters. And let me make this clear, I don't necessarily condone violence or all the actions of the rioters, but they had a right to be out there on the streets. Their children were targeted by this evil maniac psychopath, Axel Rudakabana. He had a moment to address their concerns from the pulpit, but no, he slandered them all as violent racists and thugs, and he put them all in prison. Oh yeah, and at the same time, what else did he do? He emptied all the prisons of all the criminals that were already in there. Ostensibly, he said this because he needed there to be more room. Completely spitting in the face of law and order. Now, working class British people, they may be rough, they may be rugged, but they care about law and order. They want their streets to be safe of crime, because whenever there's a lot of crime going about, they're the ones who are most likely to be targeted by these criminals. That's what they care about most. They want jobs. They want the streets to be safe and clean. They want stability. They want economic stability, and they're getting none of those things. And those are the reasons why they went out and tore shit up in the summer of last year. But Keir Starmer didn't give them any of those things. He gave nothing away to these people. He basically declared war on them, spat in their faces. What else has he done? He's been raising taxes left, right, and centre, especially on the farmers. Now, there's plenty of. Let me make one thing clear. There's a sort of hierarchy of jobs and services that any economy needs, right? a lot of the jobs floating around in the modern economy are basically, optional. They're all vanities. Things like being a professor of genderqueer studies at Oxford University. Nobody's really going to be upset if these people get out of work. Let's be real. But farmers are vital to the economy. In fact, farmers have always been vital to the economy. If we don't have farmers, we don't have food. And what does that mean? If we don't have food, it means we starve. It means the price of food goes way up because we have to get the food from elsewhere. And nobody is fooled by this ridiculous idea that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, put forth, that these farmers are getting rich by owning all this land that's doubled in value and we want them to pay their fair share. No, nobody is buying it. This is about declaring war on not just the working class, but it's about basically declaring war on the economy. And taxes have been completely going through the roof. There's no sense of economic prudence by the current administration. They just want to tax the hell out of anything. And ordinary British people are getting sick and tired of this. I can't tell you how many times I've been scrolling through YouTube only to come across in my recommended video section videos with titles like why I'm British and why I'm leaving the UK, or what the UK is completely cooked, why I'm leaving to Thailand. Rich people, the upwardly mobile young British people who could afford to, they're leaving this country. They can't see a future. It's all because of taxes. Now, I don't earn enough money personally to be in a position where I'm affected by these taxes, but I totally understand and sympathize with their decision to leave the country. It's going to suck for those of us who can't afford to leave, obviously. But you would think somebody in Keir Starmer's position, he would be aware that his policies are alienating the people whose support he needs if he wants to stay in power. But no, he's just smashing to pieces everything in this country, all in order to inflict his ideological agenda, the end stages of Tony Blair's multicultural Globo Homo project. And he hasn't done anything about mass immigration. He's he talks a big game, and he's been accusing Kemi Badenoch of being a liar and a hypocrite in the Houses of Parliament by pretending to be against mass immigration. But everyone knows that he's still on board with the Global Britain project. No one's forgotten what he did to the working class Brits during the Southport riots. It's not like he's unaware of the fact that this country's economy is being absolutely wrecked by mass immigration. We've all woken up to the fact that this idea that immigration brings jobs and it brings wealth and prosperity, it's all a lie. And nobody is experiencing any of the benefits. I'm trying to think, has there been any more of a hated Prime Minister in recent history than Keir Starmer? I don't think there has. There is so much animus towards him, even from people on the left, even leftists, even people like Aaron Bastani from that insufferable leftist podcast, the Novara Media. Even he doesn't like him. Even leftist historians like TIK History have put out videos condemning Keir Starmer. Is there a single... Oh yeah, and also he's alienated elderly people because of the WASPy pensions and stuff like that. Is there a single group of people in the country that Keir Starmer hasn't in some way alienated with any of his policies? And this is where the crux of my argument comes in. Keir Starmer is a blessing in disguise, because he's not the only person who's effectively being impeached through his terrible policies. It's not just him who's on trial. It's the whole liberal world order, Global Britain project. It's the legacy of Tony Blair's Global Britain that is on trial here. It's not just Keir Starmer who's hated. It's everything he represents. It's the legacy of Tony Blair. It's all falling apart. There has never been a prime minister who, within months of getting into power, has had this petition, which has recently exceeded 3 million signatures of having called for him to resign and there being a new election. It's never happened before, at least not this quickly. And as I mentioned earlier, the kind of violence that we saw last year, the anger towards Keir Starmer and his administration, it just wasn't possible under Rishi Sunak. Yeah, that's what I call him, Rishi Sunak. Because Rishi Sunak, he was, for all his faults, and for however much we despise the man, he was at least a shrewd politician and a smooth talker. He knew how to talk to the public in such a way so as to allay their fears, which is what made him an even more evil and sickening enemy of the British establishment than Keir Starmer. Because Keir Starmer doesn't mince words. He's not even interested in trying to help the British people out. He just wants to hammer down and drive the ideology of Tony Blair's liberal global Britain to its endgame result. He's giving the game away. He's I bet Tony Blair, every time he reads about Keir Starmer in the news, he's just like, what are you doing? Are you trying to ruin my beautiful dream of turning Britain into a multicultural, impoverished cesspit? What are you doing, man? No, not like that, not like that. And yeah, Labour has his polls have never been lower, and not just Keir Starmer, but everyone in his party. Like, people roundly despise them. There has never been such widespread anger towards the liberal globo homo establishment in Britain than there has nowadays. And there's never been such an appetite for change in the air. And the conversation, especially with regards to what happened with Elon Musk and Twitter. Elon Musk has been using his pulpit, his audience of 500 million people on tweet. He's been drawing attention to things that Keir Starmer's failings as a prime minister, like especially with the grooming gangs. There's no way Keir Starmer can put a lid on his failures as a prime minister because of what he stands for as a politician. He is part of the liberal global world order, and the global liberal world order, the Globo Homo Tony Blair project, is falling apart at the seams, and it is beautiful to watch in real time. And I promise you, come 2029, by the time of the next election, the people will have had enough. There will be no more of this two-party politics nonsense. The state media that has long since been a cheerleader for the Globo Homo project and tried to control and curate the conversation and hide the facts and pull the wool from our eyes, it won't be able to put a lid on this. The days of Tony Blair's Globo Homo multicultural world order are coming to an end. And Keir Starmer has made himself into the straw man, the enemy, the devil incarnate, and the perfect representative of the global world order, and he is turning the British people away from it. He's making the British people more angry. He's stoking the appetite for a revolution against the current powers that be in a way that simply would not have been possible if somebody like Rishi Sunak, or anybody else, or Tony Blair, or David Cameron would have been. And it is thanks to Keir Starmer that change is coming. I promise you this. There's never been a stronger appetite for change in the air. And honestly, this is the part where I say thank you to Keir Starmer, because he is accelerating the project. I forgot to say this earlier, but I got to get this quickly off my chest. So it's often been, scientists have talked about in the past, right, where if you try to boil frogs alive in a saucepan of hot water, they'll jump straight out of it. But if you put them in a pan full of cold water and you try to slowly boil the water while they're in, they won't notice and they'll boil and die. And this is what I find insidious about all the politicians up until Keir Starmer, because they've been slowly increasing the temperature. But Keir Starmer, what's he been doing? He's ramped it straight up to 110. And people are beginning to see that the jig is up, basically. People know what the game plan is. They're not fooled by the lies of the media. They know that immigration is out of control. They're not buying any of the silly arguments that we're being told. They know that basically everyone in the universities, everyone in the media, the M1 bubble is lying to our faces. They all know that there's corruption in Westminster. They all know that none of these people, none of these quangos are accountable to the public, and they are furious. And it is thanks to Keir Starmer and his odious, his rampant, unabashed hatred for everything that England represents, that change will surely be coming around the corner. And that is why I say Keir Starmer is actually an absolute legend. He will be the one to bring down the much hated and despised multicultural global Britain world order. Some food for thought for you guys to think about. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think in the comments if you've got an opinion on this. I'd be happy to give you consider your thoughts and give them a hearing. See you later.